What's up? What's up? What's up? This is Dr. Hardwick, and you are listening to the Hardly Typical podcast. This is season 2. We got some special things planned for this season. But before we get into that, what's up, Dr. Lee?
Hello. How's it going?
It is going. As I always say, I could complain, but I won't.
There you go.
So
there
actually,
you go.
I'm
Always
lying. I'm lying. I've been complaining a lot, but
okay.
I've been
What's going
complaining
on?
to God.
Why are you complaining a lot?
No, I'm complaining to God, so it's all good. But
Okay.
I don't want to lie to the listeners and say I don't complain. I complain a lot. But me and God, we got our own thing. But how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, the lead 3 are keeping me on my toes.
Oh yeah.
So we're working that out. They're asking for animals for Christmas.
Okay. That's a whole other
Dogs,
episode.
And one wants a monkey, one wants a dog. We
monkey.
Pray my strength. Pray my strength.
The Lord bless you and keep you.
There you go. You know.
Yeah, we don't do monkeys. Just let them know there's a history with that word. We don't do monkeys.
Listen, we're not bringing anything in this house that breathes and requires maintenance. Okay.
I got you.
Absolutely
I got you. I got you.
So all is well. All is well.
Good. Well, we got something special planned for today.
Yes, we do. We have our first special guest.
Yeah.
I think this is about to be a dynamic conversation.
I do too.
So let me do a quick introduction then, and we'll get right into it.
All right, let's do it.
Sounds good. Dr. Charles Goodman Jr. Dr. Charles is a dynamic senior pastor of the historic Tabernacle Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, where he leads a thriving multi-campus congregation of over 12,000 members since 2006. A passionate preacher, author, and teacher, Dr. Goodman holds multiple advanced degrees. Let me say that again, multiple advanced degrees, including a PhD in leadership, and he's an author of 4 books. Right? 4. Some of us struggling to write our first one. He done already wrote 4. Come on now. Known for his engaging preaching style and love for practical messages, Dr. Goodman inspires with his unique blend of wisdom and humor. We've already seen that a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the pulpit, he's a proud Philadelphia Eagles fan and an avid sports enthusiast and a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Divine Nine, stand up.
Yep.
With a heart for ministry and a love for people, Dr. Goodman is making a difference in faith, leadership, and the community. Welcome, Dr. Charles Goodman.
Yo, what's up, guys? What's up? Dr. Hardwick, my brother, my friend, Dr. Lee. Good to meet you on this platform. First of all, I need to know who wrote that introduction, because whoever did it, I need to spend him a little money, because that seems over the top. I feel like there's an embellishment, and I feel like you're really telling truth. Your listening audience?
No, definitely not.
All facts, sir. All facts.
No.
So let's be honest.
This. There was a 2-pager we could edit from because it had so much. I was like, wow, he is really a dynamic leader.
Fake news. Yeah. Fake news. That is fake news.
Let me say full disclosure to our listening audience. Dr. Goodman and I have been friends for well over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing me a tremendous favor by being on this podcast. And let me say this. Dr. Goodman is one of my homiletical heroes.
Man, there you go. Man, don't get on this, be acting up like this, man. This is not a favor. You are my boy. You is my man's 50 grand. This is so once again, thank you, bro. I really appreciate this opportunity, Dr. Lee. Great for this engaging conversation. So
we appreciate you being on. But listen, we know you're a man who has a lot going on, as we just kind of glimpsed into it with your intro. So we want to just get right into it. So Dr. Lee, I know you had some questions because we talked about this, and I know Charles a little bit.
We did,
because we've known each other since early 2000s. But I know you had a question about his start in ministry.
I did, but go ahead, take the lead.
Okay, I got it. Dr. Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
Now I kind of know the answer to this, but for our listening audience, some people may not be aware of your background and your ministry. But Can you just tell us, around what age did you start leading in ministry? And leading into that question, if you could tell us a little bit more about your story as it pertains to ministry.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, man, the genesis of my story really starts, man, I was adopted at 14 months of age by my maternal grandparents. So rest in peace to Deacon Ernest Swan and my grandmother who just passed away this year. So, and I think at 8 years old, I kind of felt I had a call, but I didn't know exactly what it was. I always had this inkling that God was speaking to me. I think that's really got passed down through the experience and engagement of my grandparents. But I would say that when I entered into college and coming into my senior year, I was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And at that time, I was still kind of wrestling with what to do. I really wanted to be a lawyer. I mean, growing up, preachers didn't seem that appealing of a career choice. And I wanted to be a lawyer, man, make some money, drive a nice car and all that kind of good stuff. And it really was this epiphany, this health issue that occurred to me my senior year that kind of refocused me. It became what I call my burning bush moment. And then it was like, all right, what am I going to do with this call? And so, when you have such a heavy diagnosis, when at that time I was told that I perhaps may have 2 years to live. I mean, I'm 21 at the time. Wow. And, I just really had that come to Jesus talk with God and was like, okay, what's this going to be? And if it's going to be just 2 years, I'm going to give you all these 2 years. And so it was that formation of giving my initial sermon at 21, April 2001. And then from there, it became like this rolling kind of experience. From there, I took a year off, and then I entered Emory Catholic School of Theology, where I met Dr. Hardwick. Man, we had some wonderful times, some wonderful conversations. And so at 21, I get licensed. 22, I get ordained. 23, I start pastoring. My first pastorate was a small congregation in Salem, Alabama. And God graced us to serve there, for 3.5 years, man, wonderful people. And then so you have that, graduated at 25 with my master's. I start my doctorate at Wesley Theological, my first one. 26, 27, I get called to Tabernacle in Augusta, Georgia. So we've been rocking there. This is moving into my 18th year from there. And they're just, man, things have just been moving, growing, and just grinding. And so it was through that genesis. I never would have thought that I would have been a pastor to that level. I really thought ministry initially when I started was going to be part-time. I was going to be a lawyer, maybe preach on the side. And but God had this plan for me, which I'm grateful God didn't tell me how I was going to roll, because I probably would have tried. I probably would have jacked it up if I know how this thing was supposed to unfold. So I've just been one of those who, I think one of my spiritual gifts is faith. And so just trusted God step by step. And here we are 18 years, 20 some odd years after that initial moment, diagnosis. God has been faithful, learning, growing, serve a wonderful church in Augusta, and still trying to expand. Still feel like I got so much more to learn, to do, to experience. So I feel like a Neo in this ministry thing. I still feel like, I gotta get better, gotta grow. And so that's what kind of drives me every single day.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to question that Neo status.
Listen, I'm a Neo. I'm still learning.
We're going to question that. But, hey, we'll keep it humble in the morning. But by the afternoon, we're going to have to go ahead and admit it, okay?
Yeah.
But I love that you said you think one of your spiritual gifts is faith. Now I have to dive into that.
Come on, let's go.
So you say one of your spiritual gifts is faith. So I am primarily a parent educator and a practical theologian.
Okay.
I work with families. I work with parents who have children that are significantly disabled.
Okay.
So faith isn't always in abundance. I think of the scripture that says, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, right?
I got you.
Yeah. So when I read your story, when I was just looking you up, when I saw, and here's the thing, everybody that I mentioned to you already knew. So I feel like I was out of the loop, and I need to apologize for being out of the loop, because once I was in it, I was like, I should have known this guy 10 years ago. So the sermons I found, the YouTube videos I found, I was blown away. So the fact that you say you think one of your spiritual gifts is faith, I'm going to agree with you on that. But I want to speak specifically to parents Parents who have grown up in church, they have had a significant, relationship with God, excuse me, but now they're in a place where they may have a child or a loved one with a disability that they can't hide, that they can't pretend they don't have, that affects their daily life significantly.
Yeah.
And they're saying, I believe, but help my unbelief.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure your diagnosis in some way affected your testimony and your ministry. But can you speak to those families who are saying, I just don't, I can't even say I have more than a mustard seed, let alone say this is a gift I have.
Yeah. All right, we're going to dive into some deep stuff. And actually, I may give you some information that I'm not even sure is known publicly as much. So one of my greatest influences on my life was my cousin. His name was Lamar Hardwick, who's born, wasn't able to walk. Matter of fact, he ultimately became a state rep in Kentucky. He just passed away this past year. That was very tragic. He was one of those who just didn't want nobody to help him. He was going to always do it. Like, when you ain't pushing him in a wheelchair, I would run into him through Atlanta airport. He'd be wheeling through. And, I mean, he just had one of those kind of things he was never going to say he couldn't do anything. I will acknowledge that I do think his disability really fed into what ultimately led to the separation of my aunt and my uncle. Taking care of a disabled child became to be a lot. And I'm not sure in their genesis of their relationship and marriage, because it was not really one of the strongest, it couldn't survive that way. So I understand that reality. Also, I don't know if y'all know, last year I was in the process of adopting a little boy. And so initially when they came to me, they told me he had ADHD. And so it was kind of fast. And within 4 months, come to find out it was not just ADHD. The system did not inform me of the length, the width and breadth of his emotional, mental states. I mean, he had a real bad blow up that his diagnosis came out with not just ADHD, but CD and RAD and every D you could think of, to the point where I had to make the very painful decision to be like, what he needs, I can't provide. The emotional care that someone at this, and he was only 7 at the time, and I had to make a very hard decision that I still wrestle. It hadn't even been a year, and it was a lot, and I wrestled, and I still wrestle. Like, okay, here I am, I got great church, I'm doing all this great stuff, and I felt it was an opportunity for me to pay it forward. You know, I was adopted by my maternal grandparents, have an opportunity to raise a Black son and to create legacy and to really, in my mind, change his entire life. But because of some challenges that I just could not do myself, I had to make that painful decision that I couldn't proceed forward. And I can't reiterate how painful it still is. Right? I'm not really looking forward to this season because it happened last year around Christmas. So what I'm saying is that faith is this journey. I've never been one to think that faith in God is based upon just what everything works with. And I will acknowledge to you that growing up, the old saints, and we were talking about this before, I grew up in a Black church. I'm a product of the Black church. I love the Black church and apologies for the Black church. And so they would be saying, they would say, he'll never put more on you than you can bear. This is the whole. But man, there's sometimes.
Yeah, man.
I didn't always subscribe to that. Like, no, there are moments I can't bear this at all. Like,
Definitely.
So I think the encouragement would come in the journey of it. Faith is never fluid. It's never faith to me never just works in the good days and good moments. Faith is strengthened and fortified in those moments that I question, that I wrestle. That's why I'm glad El was like, no, I complain. Me and God got this unique relationship because I can go to God like, look here, bro, I ain't feeling this. You know, this is not how this is supposed to be working out.
Right.
And yeah, you know, I think that's it. You know, that Mark 9 text has always been intriguing to me because, you know, he acknowledges, listen, I got faith, but I also help my unbelief. I think every person who's a disciple, follower of Christ has to acknowledge that tension. I believe. I really do. I mean, I really do. I'm trying my best to be faithful. But what I really need help is this unbelief, this doubt, this struggle, this strain. that is causing me at this time to really have some major moments. I don't question who you are. There are moments I question if you're still good.
Yeah, that's real.
I don't question your existence. That's not up for me, my debate at this moment. I do wrestle.
Yeah.
God is good all the time. Okay, there are moments I'm like, okay, we need to parse out this all the time thing, because I'm not sure if I get what that is and how that is and how that gets manifested.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I very rarely talk to parents and discuss the existence of God. We talk about the goodness of God.
The goodness.
We talk about the presence of God. Is he here? Is he here? Because if he was here and he saw this, would he really be silent? You're absolutely right. That's spot on.
Yeah. I had somebody recently. I had somebody recently say, because I had some changes in my, it's public knowledge about my cancer journey. But I had some changes in my care that have actually turned out to be good. And somebody said, "Oh, God was really looking out for you." And I was like, "For real though?" And they were like, "What do you mean?" I said, I like, if he was looking out for me, he really dropped the ball on this whole cancer thing to begin with. Because I got better care now, but I just had this, and they were kind of shocked that I said that. And I said, that's just real. Like, that's how I feel right now. Like, in this situation, I did end up getting better care. But to say that God was looking out for me, I'm like, I can go all the way back to the beginning and say, if he was looking out, he dropped the ball on that one. Because not only did I get cancer once, I got it twice. I agree with you. Sometimes it's not the existence. Like, I know God is who he says he is, but sometimes it's the goodness that you're just like, right now, I don't feel that good. So, I concur.
Yeah.
Now, I want to back up just a little bit. Dr. Goodman, can I call you PG? I'm used to calling you PG.
Man, call me what you want to call me.
I'm used to calling you PG since the early days. So for those who don't know, because we, the name of our podcast is Hardly Typical. It's a play off of both of our last names, but it's also a nod to having some of the conversations that are hardly typical in a lot of podcast spaces, especially a lot of spaces where, minorities and Black people of color are doing podcasts. And so we like to talk about things that are hardly typical. So I want to go back to, because some people don't know, we talk a lot about disabilities, but usually we talk about children, we talk about autism, we talk about, a lot of other things that are very important. But I'm not sure how much our audience knows about the diagnosis of ALS. So if you could just kind of take us through that, what it is and what you heard when you first heard those words and learned what it was and what it typically does in its progression.
Yeah. Well, man, so when I heard those words, man, I thought death. I mean, what had initially happened going into the first semester of my senior year, I started just experiencing weakness in my right extremity. And I was at the assumption it was carpal tunnel. I was, at that time, early 2000s, what we in the laptops and we typing all these papers. I'm like, man, what's going on? I was an athlete, so I played basketball, high school, a little bit in college before I broke my foot and stuff. So it's like, well, okay, I'm not sure. Maybe it's carpal tunnel, all this other stuff. And just out of a whim, just like, man, I really probably just need to go see if I need to have surgery, whatever I need to do. And so I went to some experts, man, just like, hey, I just, through the grace that God had given me, I knew some doctors in Winston and then Greensboro, which is 20 minutes away from Winston, my hometown, Greensboro, North Carolina. Guy that was my doctor for our basketball team. Went to see him, said, hey, man, I'm just feeling some weakness. I just need to know what I need to do, So, man, I went through a battery of tests and all this stuff. And I'll never forget, I get the call. It's January 21st, 2001, January 22nd, 2001. I get a call and say, we ran the battery test. We did all this. And it's our expert opinion based upon everything we've tried to go through, that you have Lou Gehrig's disease. And this comes with a diagnosis of 2 years of life left. And you can only imagine how I felt. My mom and my granddad accompanied me to this doctor's appointment. And I just was at the thing like, what in the world? See, what it does is it stops the communication between your muscles and your nerves. And eventually what it does is erodes your ability to move. Your mind is still available, but you'll eventually lose the ability to operate physically. Your body shuts down. You eventually die, really, honestly, because your body can't swallow, can't breathe. Those things that the nerves and muscles are needed to do, it attacks that. And so it really gets his name from Lou Gehrig, who was a famous baseball player who died of this. It typically happens to people who are older, right? 50, 60. At the time, I'm 21 years old. So that was kind of rare as well. And that's what happened. Now, I'm going to tell you, God's goodness is found in this aspect. One of the leading ALS doctors in the country worked at Wake Forest and literally had a 2-year wait to see him. But because of my relationship on campus and being there, they were able to get me in to see him within the next week. Wow. So began this new regimen, doing all that stuff. And so, man, I had to tragically kind of figure out what to do. I had 1 semester left of school. At that time, I'm thinking I'm going to law school. I got LSAT stuff coming up. You know, it was just a lot. But here we are. You know, it's been 23 years since that diagnosis. And, you know, God has kept me for whatever reason. And it's morphed. I'll be very honest with you. I typically had my symptoms under control. This year, I had more of my neurological symptoms come back because of the compoundment of grief. Not only with the little boy now working, but then my grandmother, who was 96, raised me, who I am more like passed away. Man, I had a dog that I got during COVID. He died of liver. It's just been a hell of a year. I can say that on this podcast right now.
You can say, you're fine. Okay. You're fine.
And so I almost started to have a re-emergence of a lot of my neurological issues this year. And I literally, I'm actually got an appointment in a few weeks to go to a pain management doctor to kind of work on some new strategies about, all right, I ain't felt like this in years. So what can I do? How can I mitigate, you know, how can I still grind like I grind, but still try to, you know, handle what I need to handle? So I said all that to say that this has been an ongoing thing, and it's been my cross to bear. I was very uncomfortable early talking about it because I didn't want people feeling sorry for me. But I do understand now that people need to hear testimonies, share them, because I'm getting calls throughout these 20-some odd years from people all over the world. When my story went, I think it was on 700 Club. They did a documentary on me a few years ago before COVID. So other stuff that has come up, and through those interactions, people have reached out to me. And so I've formed some really incredible relationships and friendship with people who were diagnosed with it. And even if they didn't experience it on the other side like I have, they were just so grateful to know someone who was able, they could look at it and say, you know, it is possible. So that's been an interesting journey. The truth of the matter is there's been many throughout these years who didn't make it. The healing came through transition. That's the other part of our faith that oftentimes we don't like to talk about, because many times the healing that we're expecting don't always happen on the side. You know, so that becomes the tension. And so, I hope I answered that. But that's kind of been that journey. And still, like I said, I still got to go see the doctor in a few weeks about pain management, because I just started to develop stuff. My doctor thinks it's this grief and stuff, and how it's manifested itself, you know, by bringing up some things that I haven't had to deal with in years.
Wow.
I'll just say,
definitely.
I'll just say before we move on, Dr. Lee, because I just had to say this, you know, Charles, our PG and I talk. One thing that I can say about him and our friendship is he's always the first one to call me when something's going on. Like when I first said I had cancer, first call, and I tell my wife this all the time, because we have a little text thread with some other pastor friends. Some of them are pretty well known around the country. And so, you know, we joke around, we talk, but whenever there's something that's going on in my life, I tell my wife, Charles is going to call me. And she's like, how do you know? I say, because he's always the first one to call me. So I say that to say this, I appreciate, because I've known your story for a while. I think the year that we first met was technically supposed to be your last year of life. And I remember you sharing just a little bit about it, but over the years, me getting the chance to know about your journey. And so I appreciate you sharing more openly, because like we said earlier, this is sometimes not a typical conversation we have in, amongst Black folks, amongst the Black church experience. And so someone of your stature and influence talking about it. But then on a personal level, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Lee. On a personal level, I got to say, knowing your story for the number of years that I have known it, and you always saying that one line, if it's 2 years, I'll give it to you. Let me tell you why that's been important to me, because exactly 2 years ago, when I found out my cancer came back and that it had spread, we were going through all the treatments. They gave me the number of treatments. We had a plan. And then one day I walk into my oncologist's office and he basically tells me, we're no longer trying to cure your cancer. It's now palliative. And he asked me, some people want to know prognosis, some people don't. So I was like, well, what's your opinion? He said 2 to 3 years. That was 2 years ago. And I said that to say that I remember you saying, and I've always held on to that, where you said, Lord, if it's 2 years, I'll give it to you. And that's sort of been, I don't want to plagiarize your prayer, but that's kind of been my prayer too. Like, okay, God, now I still believe. And you said something years ago about how you work out and you eat and you train because you really believe. And I hope I'm not out of line by sharing this, because I think you said this publicly.
No, absolutely.
I think you said this publicly on some of the interviews you've done, but you said, you believe that your fidelity to your calling is tied to how God is continuing to sustain you. I used to tell my wife, like, wow, that's big. Like, PG goes as hard as he does, preaching and teaching and traveling the country, because he really believes that promise that he made to God is tied to God sustaining him. And so I just want to say, and I don't know if you want to respond before we go back to Dr. Lee. I just say those two things that you said have sustained me in this time where I was told I got 2 years, and that was 2 years ago. And honestly, I've tried to model my life, whether it was, being better about how I eat, how I train, but also my prayers and what I do specifically in the area of disability ministry. I learned that from you. So I just want to publicly thank you for sharing that, because that has sustained me over the last couple of years.
Wow. First of all, Big L, you my hero. The way you have attacked this, and man, you the GOAT, man. So, your brother got you lifted. Our friends got you lifted. If you need anything, we got you. And man, I just admire you as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as a pastor, so keep grinding, man. Listen, we're getting inspiration from you. So I'm really kind of thrown that you said I inspire you, because, man, you inspire me. You know what I'm saying? So thanks for just being who you are, man, and just love to you and love to your family. But I think that same sentiment, like, I really believe I'm alive because I told God, if it's just 2 years, I'm going to give it to you. And so this ain't a job for me. This isn't an occupation, right? Like, I'm not just a pastor because this is something. No, this is who I am. Like, I really believe that if I stop doing this, I stop existing. That's it for me. There's nothing else that I can do, right? And it goes back to that moment. I think that God has honored that by allowing me to go way beyond what many would say that early on I would have ever made it to. And so that's why that question we were talking about, Neo, like, seriously, like, every day is a gift from God to me. Now, after a while, once you face something like that, like cancer or ALS, like, you got a whole different perspective of stuff. Like, little stuff don't even bother you. You're like, listen, man, I done faced a lot of other stuff. So for me, I woke up this morning. It's a win. It's like, I got another day. I got something else, right? Regardless of what happens this day. Like, there's some pretty rough days, right? It's not all sunny, but I got another day, right? And so you're going to attack it. You got to do it. So, yeah, that's just been my way to get it. And I feel like God has honored that. God has honored that I'm trying to keep that promise. And so to those who are listening, man, it's just one of those things. It's just, I wish I had better words to say it. It's just, I believe in my heart. This is why God has kept me alive. It's because I'm trying to show fidelity for that promise. So, yeah. That's good. I want you to know that, man. I love you, man. You just, I mean, it's just, man, amazing.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate it, bro.
Keep inspiring, man. Keep on living, man, because you the man to us. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, Dr. Lee's like, y'all just had a moment. And I'm just,
it was a romance. Right? It's our romance.
I'm like, anything I say in this moment is going to be inadequate, okay?
No. And he knows.
This was a moment here.
And he knows, man, I want that to be public. He knows, him and his family, whatever they need. And whatever he needs, So, listen. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know that, it's a moment, but, Dr. Lee, you're important to this conversation too. Like, as you said, as like a parent, educator, and somebody who, I always say that, PG, that she's like 10 times smarter than me. That's why I got a co-host.
That's good. That's good.
We need that's smarter than me.
Black women, man, they keep us alive, man. They keep us going.
Exactly. Like, and I told her, like, this is my season for trying to, especially in this space of disability ministry and disability theology, it's my season to try to help platform more Black women who are doing the good work. And so I know I'm going to share this with you, and then I'll turn over to Dr. Lee. I know that you do a lot of work, Terisha, with the church, which is why I appreciate, our collaboration as me in 20 plus years of pastoring, you being a PhD, having, the research background and doing a lot of work with the church specifically. I remember our very first conversation where you contacted me after I wrote the book, Disability in the Church in 2021. And you were like, man, how do we help infuse this into the Black church experience? So I want to turn this segment over to you to talk a little bit more, to share with PG a little bit more what you do, but also for us to kind of shift gears and talk about, maybe what the church is doing and maybe what the church can do better. And, start with you, because you've been doing a lot more research in that area than I have done in the past.
Okay. Let's definitely talk about it. So, as a practical theological researcher, I focus on congregational research. So I have had the privilege of working with churches throughout the United States on practices they're doing well and practices they may not be doing as well. I'm leaking into the Caribbean, but we're working on establishing some great relationships there too. And I have to say, specifically for disabilities, I find that most people don't know what to do. If you aren't at the altar for healing, sit in the back and try not to make too much noise. The area for the wheelchair, it's by the back door. If you feel like you have to get up and move, sit closer to the door. It's kind of like, just stay out of the way, right? In the nicest way we can possibly say it. So from that, I found that a lot of parents just don't go. Parents with little ones who can't sit still with ADHD, you mentioned earlier, with autism, with Down syndrome, they either don't go at all, or they become adults who find the church irrelevant. An inspirational word I can get from, podcasts. I can get an inspirational word from PBS, the cute little messages they're teaching our kids while I'm watching with my kids. They don't necessarily find the need for the church. I grew up in the Black church. I'm going to die in the Black church. I'm always going to have love for the Black church. So one of the biggest things that I feel like I have to do in this journey is continue to maintain that love and show that appreciation for the Black church. So that leads me to this question. As early as within the last 6 months. I've heard of little black boys, because black boys are one of the highest growing group in autism, but also in ADHD as well, being brought to the altar so that the demon can be beaten out of him. That ADHD demon, that autism demon, that. My question is, does the Black church have any obligation to not only learn more about disabilities, but to also accommodate our Black boys and Black girls with disabilities? Because from the outside looking in, we're not doing a great job.
Absolutely. Well, yes. A resounding yes. And while you're thinking, it's making me think of a kid by the name of Zach, man. Zach is like 20-some years old now, but when he was born to one of our leaders of the church, was born with he's in a wheelchair. And you're right. When I walk into our main location services, especially at the 10:30, he's right there by the back door. I mean, that's where the wheelchair accessible spaces are. One of our colleagues from Candler, Hale knows Pastor George Miller, his son, who's also one of my god kids, Charles, we call him Champ, autism, just turned 17, 18. So, I mean, full on, he doesn't communicate in ways that we audibly communicate, and he just had an issue where he was going through an issue, but he didn't know he couldn't articulate it to his parents. So they ended up having to take him to the hospital in Atlanta to try to figure out what was going on. So you're making me think, and this is so significant, because no, we absolutely have not done enough. I don't think we're educated enough. And I hate that we have harmed people by calling these moments like ADHD and stuff demonic and try to cast them out, or autism to cast them out, right? And it's those moments I feel like we've done harm. We've just done harm, and we're going to have to figure out a way to make amends, to create spaces and fellowships and ministries for people who this is their daily battle, right? That's why I think L's book was such a needed book, and it's right there on my bookshelf. It's actually what I was talking to my leadership tonight about, because I'm having a meeting tonight with our ministries. We're doing a ministry audit next year, and it's some of the things that I'm looking at, because I don't think we don't do a good enough job, and I don't think parents even really know, because when you come to church, so church ministry is also interesting, youth ministry at church, because typically now, I don't know how in most churches, but it becomes a daycare, right? We drop our kids off at the youth church, but we don't tell the youth worker what is going on with our child.
Sure.
I'll acknowledge, I don't think a lot of my youth workers probably know. They don't probably prepare, right? We just don't know. So I don't know what the guardrails are. I don't, so that is, I would love to go deeper into that.
We want to preserve. We want to preserve our children. Here's the thing. Your first mind when it comes to your child is protect.
Absolutely.
So I run into parents who don't want to share full diagnoses because don't treat my child different.
Gotcha.
Don't exclude my child. But what I'm trying to do, and I talk about Lamar and I's relationship as the parent and the pastor. What I'm trying to do is have those conversations with parents and pastors where, listen, the first time you notice something different about your child, what do you usually do? Take them to the pastor. Pastor, pray for him. Pastor, I noticed something's different. I don't know what's going on, but can you just pray? Absolutely, pray. God is still a healer. God is still a miracle worker. I'll never negate that. But once you're finished praying, hand them to a professional. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. We say we are family oriented. And I love that we say that we focus on the family. But unfortunately, it has been my experience through research that most churches aren't as family friendly as they say they are. They can't accommodate families the way they say they want to or the way they say they do. So in Lamar and I coming together, we want to have that conversation. And that hardly typical tour is coming. Where we can go to those Black churches and we can go to those multicultural churches and say, here's how we can handle that. Let's pass that over. Now, I feel like that also goes into purpose. And you wrote a book about purpose called You Can't Run From Your Purpose, which the title alone, I'm like, come on now.
Please don't judge me. That was
your first book?
If I could go back, Dale understands this, but I could go back. I would love to redo some books and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That was my first journey through the book. But
I tell people that all the time.
I wish I could. Yeah.
So a revision is coming. Is that what you're saying?
It's different. I think whenever you encounter scripture or experience, life happens. I mean, that book to me is almost 10, 12, 13 years old. And so I got a lot more experience on those things than that, right? Like, I think that's the gift of age is that. And on one hand, it's tough getting older, but there's the blessing of being older is that you get the experience and you kind of learn and you grow and you just kind of figure out better than what you did yesterday. I mean, I hope that's the aim of humanity is that every day, with this day's experience, I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday. So, so that purpose piece, and I really appreciate that because I do think, and I would offer up our church being one of the places I hope that y'all would come back because I'm thinking even facility wise, we're not prepared. Mm-hmm. Building's 100 years old. Mm-hmm. So I know we don't have the best accessibility I can be just honest. Mm-hmm. The building's 100 years old and they just put an elevator in like maybe 30 years, 45 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, but so man, it's so much that we're just not getting. And I wonder, and I don't mean to take this other place, but I wonder, is that because within the Black family, and the core and foundation of the Black church is the Black family, right? Like we grew up not talking about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that becomes a microcosm of how the Black church is not always prepared to have these conversations because our Black families, which make up the core of the Black church, didn't really want to deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. We know PD had an issue, right? But we just kind of dismissed it. We just didn't, we called it what we called it. Unfortunately, we used some very culturally insensitive terms, but that's how we did. We call them crazy.
Call them slow.
Right?
Special.
Like we were special, right? That's what it was. And so that became the term. So it was never that way. And I don't know how the educational system, because most oftentimes when we get into our schools, they dismiss our kids for being crazy. I was diagnosed ADHD when I was growing up, ADD when I was growing up, right? Mm-hmm. And to the point where they wanted to put me in special ed. My grandmother came to that school and fought for me. Mm-hmm. And she said, my son is not crazy. He's not slow. As a matter of fact, what she acknowledged was I was bored. The work was too easy for me. So I would finish the work and then I would just have nothing to do. So I didn't have all this little energy. So I'm going around talking. I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know that my mind didn't work the same. Mm-hmm. But I wonder what would have happened if I didn't have a grandmother who advocated for me and said, you're not putting my son in that. Mm-hmm. And let's go ahead and figure out a plan to maximize his thing. Even when I had the little boy for the time that I had, I was at the school forming an IEP and getting this done. But it was amazing because talking to a lot of administrators, a lot of our Black families didn't know that was a possibility. Mm-hmm. They didn't know that was an option.
Yeah.
Right? So, I have resources and I'll be doggone. I need to figure out what we can do. And but I didn't mean to veer into that, but I think a lot of what the challenges is the Black church is behind. Yeah. It's because oftentimes the Black families have not had those kind of conversations or be honest about those.
Yeah. And I'll say this, PG, you hit the nail on the head. And even though you say you didn't mean to go there, I'm glad you did. Because I'm actually, one of the visions I had is when I wrote the 2 books that I dropped is for it to be a trilogy. And the last one that I'm working on and have been working with my agent on finding a publisher is to write specifically about disability in the Black church. So you can kind of see the progression. Disability in the church is kind of for everybody. How ableism fuels racism. I wanted to attack the justice piece and help Black folks understand that our legacy has always been, attacking these issues. But one of the primary issues we don't talk about in racism is how Black folks were called inherently disabled. And so we got to talk about that as we pursue justice for race. But in the last book, and I'm glad you said that, I actually open up with that in the book. I talk about how African traditional religions brought over, shaped a lot of the way that we did things, but also the reason why we're fighting battles that we need to understand are historical. And so one of the things you talked about the family not talking about it is because very early on, our people found that it wasn't safe to talk about. Because if a master found out that a child was born with some sort of disability, the enslaved Africans used to lie and say the child didn't make it because of capitalism. A master didn't want to have a body that they had to feed and clothe that wasn't going to be able to produce. And so part of the history of Black folks is not talking about those things because it wasn't safe. We had to protect our children from greater society. Those children, unfortunately, they were burned. Some of them, they were drowned. There's not a lot of historical record because Black families kept that secret. And you see that trickle into the church, like you just said. I talked about how in a lot of Black churches, it's not necessarily that there's not, quote unquote, disability ministry. It looks different. And I talk about it a little bit in my last book about what I call shadow services, where people are being taken care of, but it's not a ministry. It's not in the bulletin. It's not, the closest that we would get to being informed about that was a sick and shut-in list, right? But there were deacons and women's ministry members who were taking care of these people who couldn't make it to church. We just didn't have a formally organized or formally educated ministry that helped support them in some greater ways. So I'm glad you brought that up because there's a reason why that has happened. And one of the things that Dr. Lee and I both are trying to do is uncover some of that history, but also help, our Black church pastors and leaders to understand where that comes from and how we can do better. And so
Absolutely.
One of the things I want to just kind of ask Dr. Lee, and it's kind of a second part to your question, is because we don't want to just necessarily end on, the Black church is like, that's one of the things I think we talked about this in our text thread one time, PG, how we get a little bit weary of everybody always dumping on the church. Like I love the church, and I tell people I've pastored multi-ethnic churches, but make no mistake, I'm a Black church product. I'm a Black church preacher. I love the Black church. And so we don't want to just dump on it. Yeah, there are things that could be done better, and we're hoping to make a significant difference. But what are some of the things that you believe as it relates to disability? And I'll expand it even a little bit. Disability, chronic illness. I'll even expand it to mental health. What are some of the things that you think that the Black church context has been doing well or has been getting better at over the last few years when it comes to disability, chronic illness, or mental health, and addressing the needs of the congregation?
For me?
Yeah. What are some of the things you think that we're doing better?
Well, at least we're talking about it. I mean, I do think at least we're now in some places are broaching the conversation. I literally just now I'm glad this is happening because first of all, let me get the term correct because it's not disabled, right? What is the correct term? I want to make sure that I'm correct. Is it disabled? Is it differently able? Like what is the proper terms?
It's very nuanced, but disability is okay.
Yeah.
It is okay.
And disabled is okay. Yeah.
Okay. I think the first thing is we're having a conversation about, every year we do a mental health forum at our church. That's one of the areas that I think is important. And we focusing a lot on our young people, parsing them out, right? So at least we're having a conversation. I think that is the great step forward. And once we get the conversation, then we can figure out the needs. But I'm grateful that that's what I've been seeing more prevalent is that people are willing to talk about. And how that disability is not just what we see physically, it is mentally, it is emotionally, right? And all of them are deserving of our empathy, of our care, and our concern. Now, I do think that the challenge, I will say, and I agree with you, El, we do have this conversation in our group text, it can't just be on the Black church alone. Like sometimes I feel like that becomes the challenge where we dump everything on the Black church without understanding that it is a partnership that has to take place, right? It's the church and it's your home.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And it's the schools,
Yep.
right? Like, I really wish that we could have better partnership with all three of those things.
Yep.
Church,
Yep.
home, school, right?
Yep.
Here's what the church can offer, right? When this can be a safe space, blah, 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 blah. And this is what we can offer. Home, this is what we offer. This is what to reinforce those things. School, blah, 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 right? Because the truth of the matter is, out of those three, I'm the least you interact with every week.
Yeah, that's true.
I am the least you interact with every week out of those. Church, home, school, the least you interact with is the church, right? So if we're the least you interact with, you can't put everything on what the church is doing.
Right.
I think the church can become a place of reinforcement. It can be a place of education. It can be a place where a safe space, even if it's just to offer spaces of fellowship and community, which I don't think you always find in schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
True.
can we do this in a safe space where, hey, we want you to come and we want you to be in a safe space where you don't feel like you got to run your child out. No, we're going to create something here where you can be in there and feel fine that your child's in there and they're good. And if it's just a collection of others who understand the same thing, there's a commonality in the community, then that could work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we can bring in an expert like Dr. Lee, like, hey, I want to do something at our church. And for those of you who this becomes part of your everyday life, we're going to bring in Dr. Lee. She's going to kind of bring some things for you to consider, some resources and other things. So let me be the connector. Let the church be the connector to be like, all right, this is the need. Here we are. Now, I don't have the resources per se, but we're going to bring in people who can point you in the right direction.
That's good.
Absolutely.
And
I always say,
absolutely.
I've always say, I've said it before, I keep saying it because I'm hoping it'll really get into our fabric, that to do good ministry, it has to be interdisciplinary. You have to have that conversation with the academy, the church, and the community, because you're absolutely right. Even if you have a service every day, that service is still only going to be an hour or two. School is still 6 to 8 hours.
Right.
You still have time in your community. You still have time at home. It has to be an interdisciplinary conversation. We have to make room for intersectionality. You're absolutely right. And I have to say, I think one of the things that the Black church has done well, and one of the things I appreciate the most, is testimony service. Okay, nobody have testimony service like a Black church. Now, we don't do it as often no more. But it is in the sharing of our testimonies and our unique stories and platforms like this, where you get to see two Black men who are both successful, who both love God, who aren't in the media for something ridiculous, and they're doing well. With the rise of disabilities in our Black and brown boys, we need to see your faces because it gives us hope. It gives us courage, if I'm honest, because Dr. Hardwick knows I don't talk about it often because I am not building a platform on my loved ones, but I have a loved one with a disability, a very close loved one. And when I first saw Dr. Hardwick in his book, I cried because I finally could see a Black man as a model for what could this possibly look like. When I saw your testimony and the 2 years, I'm sitting here crying. I'm like, you don't even know this man. What are you crying for? Because it gave me hope. Because your stories inspired me. Your stories made me say, you know what? We have to give space to this. So when I do trainings at churches, every church I work with gets a copy of Disabilities in the Church. I have just added, every church I talk to, I'm going to make sure to tell them, hey, you need to look up Pastor Goodman. Because we need to hear these testimonies. Sometimes it's not about actually knowing better. Some of us know better. We just don't know how to do better. So we need these examples. We need to hear these voices. So that's what I say the Black church has always been great about, is making room for those testimonies, making room and giving a microphone to a little 7-year-old or a little 8-year-old who feels called. So kudos to both of you for sharing. Thank you.
So thank you for your work. I think it's imperative. And I really want to see, y'all can help us push the ball down the field. Yeah. Because that's needed. It's so needed. Absolutely. There are probably so many within my congregation. Just don't get to see them every day. And you're right. We just don't tell it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you adjust, and it becomes easy to be invisible.
Yeah.
It becomes easy to be invisible.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, do I get to ask the last question, Lamar, or you got more?
No, you can go with it because I know where you're
Go ahead.
going, and I'm ready for this one. Go ahead.
You ready? Okay, because he mentioned, we're gonna elevate the church. We're gonna continue to grow and develop. But I also stumbled upon a interview where you described yourself as Baptist-costal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Lamar grew up Baptist. I grew up Pentecostal.
Lamar also was a Methodist superstar. I hope he told you that part of the story. I met him.
Wait, I'm learning new things.
Superstar.
What is this Methodist superstar? I've never heard it.
Yeah, he was a Methodist superstar.
I've been all over the place, man. Been all over the place.
Was you Turner Chapel then? Wasn't it Turner Chapel?
Yeah. Turner Chapel AME.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have AME Baptist. We got to figure out a way to mesh those together. I haven't gotten the AME Baptist yet.
Yeah. We call it Baptist.
He's like me. We spiritual mutts. We just everything.
Yeah. We're just trying to find our way. We weren't. It's clear.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. Just trying to find.
Listen, I got to tell you to go back and listen to an episode of last season I did with Dr. Lee where we talked about what we wanted to be when we grew up, and she knew at 5 what she wanted to be. So,
wow, that's amazing.
I always say that not only is she smarter than me, but she is like 10 times holier than me because she hear God like.
Wow.
She got Jesus on the main line, Doc.
That's good. Keep them there. Tell him what you want.
Don't let him gas you now. You're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, tell him what I felt that. I just got a quickening right there on the podcast.
Yep.
Oh,
remind me to insert the organ sound when I do the edit.
I love it.
Right, get the key change right now. Okay.
Yeah.
See, now, so listen. So with that said, we are both aspiring to do this tour. We're aspiring to do great things, but we have to ask you, what is the best way that we can perfect our hoop? Because I don't have it.
Keep practicing. It's really repetition. It's practice. I mean, really, honestly, it's practice. I think with anything, preaching, as with anything we do, it's best done through repetition. Malcolm Gladwell in his book some years ago, Outliers, talks about them 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you just got to put in the word.
Yeah.
Dale will tell you, man, I started pastoring in a little town called Salem, Alabama. And I'm 3.5 years, man. God bless those people. I mean, I was in there practicing all that I could do. Even now, I bless God for Tabernacle. They let me practice. And once again, I'm doing multiple services. So you got thinking, our church, before COVID, we was at 5 services, getting ready to go to 6.
Wow.
Now we have 4, get ready to go back to 5, and looking at adding that 6 again. You got to think about it. I'm getting reps. I think with anything, you want to be better at anything, get the reps. Like, that's what I think is dope about y'all doing a podcast. Season 2, shout out. You get reps, you get better doing. Like, that's the only way to do it. Like, I think many people strategize, and Al knows this as a communicator. You can write great sermons, but every writer of sermons are not good deliverers of sermons.
Facts.
There is a uniqueness in that, how you interact with the crowd, because it's not just exegeting the text, it's exegeting the crowd. How's your context? What's the flow looking like, right? That's the beauty of Black preaching that I think makes us so unique and different, is that there's a passion that we have as communicators. And so it's in the moment. Preaching is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. It is this interaction between you and the congregation. That is interaction between you and God that the congregation just happens to be over here, right? And so it just comes. It's a feel. So you want to perfect that hoop, is repetition. And develop your own voice. You know, we all have preaching heroes that we love to hear, but at the end of the day, you can only be the best at what you got. Take your little rock and rag like David. You can't wear Saul's armor. Do what you do and perfect it. And just, I think that's it. Yeah. I think that's it.
So I'm not going to get to Jackie McCullough, sadly.
You're right. You may not have Jackie McCullough, but there's a lot of other ones. That's amazing. Yeah, Jackie's the beast. She is a beast. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Jackie McCullough's a beast. Yeah. Like, she's a beast. No doubt about it. Yeah. She just preached, I think, at Greater Allen a few months ago to close out the Flakes legacy. Yes.
New York.
Yeah, she's a beast.
Yeah.
That's another one. Elaine Flake is awesome as well.
Mama Flakes is dope. So many great gifted preachers.
Cynthia Hale is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it. Put the work
All right.
in. Grind.
All right.
I think that'd be it.
Repetitions.
I work with you. You know,
El got you.
PG knows, like,
because El been preaching in so many different contexts, which I also think helps stretch it also stretches your homiletical muscle.
Yeah.
You don't have to preach in just a homogeneous context all the time.
Yeah.
So I enjoy taking on different assignments. I love my church. There's no greater place to preach to me than Tabernacle Baptist Church. But being an itinerant preacher, also enjoy the challenge of going other places because people hear differently, right?
Yeah.
I like to give a lecture. I like to, because you're always building. Different contexts also help you too. So,
yeah.
Gotcha.
But that's another one. Y'all got to bring me back one of these days and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. We need to have a whole
Absolutely.
podcast on just preaching.
Yeah,
Maybe even preaching about disability, mental health, and chronic illness.
Because most people, we love to preach Mephibosheth. Lame feet.
Yeah,
we talk about him, right?
Yeah.
We talk about him, but we don't. I don't think we deal with the disability aspect of it.
Right.
Because at the end of it, the climax and conclusion of most people entertain that sermon is he gets a seat at the table. And what's the close in that sermon is when he's at the table, you can't see what he's wrestling with. Which is that good enough? Now y'all really opened my mind to say, but is that really a good ending? That here is Mephibosheth who has to hide himself at the table.
In order to be at the table. I wrote an article about it years ago. I don't think I ever preached about it. I wrote an article about it years ago. And I talked about the fact that the real ending is that because of the seat at the table, he was able to employ 35 other people. And so it is inviting people to the table with disabilities, but also giving them influence, right? You're just not here as a token.
That's it.
You are here to represent other people and to, so he had influence. 35 other people got to eat and sustain their lives and their families because he was given a seat at the table. So,
Yeah.
But like you said, that's a whole other podcast. We're going to have to do a part 2 because, PG and I could talk about preaching all day. Sometimes we have our own text thread.
All day
so we're just talking about preaching and text. And he's like, how would you approach this? And I'm like, man, I would do this. And
See, listen, well, just invite me. I'm going to turn my mic off. I'm going to just stand here and take notes, okay?
No, I appreciate it.
Just let me in the room.
But most people don't realize we grow from people who are not preachers. You're a communicator. Your perspective also helps us because I don't think you could be a good preacher unless you hear the different perspectives. Like I tell my congregation, I bring all of you to what I consider is the sacred altar, my desk.
Absolutely.
The desk is worship. Preparing to preach is worship. And I'm bringing all of y'all there with me. So I got to sit here and I'm thinking of that family. So y'all bringing this conversation about disability is important because that's another demographic that I need to make sure is the desk. That I'm sensitive enough, right? When I'm approaching these passages with enough sensitivity to say that, that's where I've kind of grown as a preacher, to be honest, about a lot of these things. The sensitivity.
So I get the opportunity to speak at a lot of secular arenas. So in the context that you all are using, I use the example of soul food. Soul food is the best representation of the Black church in America. But at the end, the most dynamic, the central character was hidden for 90% of the movie. Clearly had a disability, but Uncle Pete was hidden in the room for most of the movie. And if we hadn't let Uncle Pete out of the room, we would have not only lost the family home, we would have lost the family harmony. But we don't talk about Uncle Pete because we keep him in the back room until we need him. And then we realize that they have what we need. So are we making room for the glory of God through our family and our loved ones that have disabilities?
That's good.
See, that's not as nice as the Mephibosheth, and you see how y'all got that?
I'm taking that. I'm taking that. Stolen.
That's all right.
Like
Go
a good
ahead.
Black
Go
preacher,
ahead.
stolen.
You got it. First time we'll give you credit. The second time is mine.
Yes.
That's all right. That's all right.
Second time is mine. So.
Second time I'll say some preacher
I was
said.
talking to Dr. Lee the other day. Reminded me of the movie Soul Food. That's how it's gonna roll. That's how it's gonna roll.
I'm all
been
right
dope,
with
man.
it.
This been dope. Thank y'all for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You to go.
Thank you.
Keep grinding, keep striving. Dr. Lee, it's such an honor and privilege to meet you with all them big degrees behind you.
It has been my honor.
I love how you shifted your body, your head, so we can all see those degrees. I love it. Do it. Do it, my sister. Yes. Do it.
He's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Just count it. I'm just looking. I just got statues and books behind mine. I need to up my ante behind me. So
yeah. Well, listen, Dr. Goodman, it's been great having you on. Before we let you go, where can people connect with you? Website, or is there anything that you want to talk about that you're working on that you want people to know about? How can people find you and connect with your work?
Well, man, always through Tabernacle Baptist Church. You can catch that on Facebook and Instagram, all those other things. My personal page, Dr. Charles E. Goodman Jr. or at DRCEGJR. Instagram, other thing. That's all I got right now. I'm trying to figure out these other social media platforms, and I don't know what's gonna happen. So I don't do X, so I'll let y'all handle that. And whatever else coming out, we'll figure out what that is. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. And every week, man, just trying to do it. So any person that reaches out, holler at me. I love to interact with people, to learn, to grow. So that's where I'm at.
Well, thank you. And let me just say before we wrap up, if you have not heard this man preach, please go to his church. Like, he's not hard to find. You could just Google him or search him on YouTube, and you can find all sorts of my favorites are the Hampton Minister Conference sermons. But yeah, PG don't notice, I listen to him every week. Like I have a list of people I listen to every week, and he's on that list. So make sure you go and listen to him. He's one of America's premier preachers. So listen, we are thankful that you joined us. Thank you to our audience for joining us for this episode of the Hardly Typical podcast. Remember, hit that subscribe button, that share button, that like button, share with everyone that you know. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you for the next episode. Peace.
See ya. Peace.